Hi, everyone. You're watching episode 84 of Yield TV. Hey, welcome back. It is Monday, March 8th, 2021. And today, this is week 10 of our DeFi class series. So we're going to be talking all today about how to become a liquidity provider. And the point of this is just because being a liquidity provider is one of the most basic investment opportunities in DeFi. It's one of the most common requirements to participate in a protocol. It's really actually one of the most important parts of making protocols successful, just by enabling there to be liquidity for tokens that are often involved. And that liquidity of those tokens leads to, again, different sorts of DeFi mechanisms being successful. So anyways, we're going to talk all about that today, how to become a liquidity provider. So here is the agenda. Let me just pull this up. Oh, and let me just hit tweet or hit return on a tweet here so others can watch this. Here we go. All right, there we go. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay. So here's what we're going to cover today. So first off, we'll talk about how AMMs work, the most common one being Uniswap. Then we'll talk about impermanent loss, how to become an LP in Zapper, why like asset LPs are very popular, and then what are the risks involved. So that's what we'll do today. And let's go ahead and just get started then. So I'm actually going to hop over to Uniswap here for a moment. And let's just talk about, this is, again, the most basic sort of utility in DeFi that we've all become accustomed to using. And maybe some of us even take it for granted. So here we go. Let me just share my screen. Here we go. Go ahead and share this. All right. So if you've ever used Uniswap or any AMM like SushiSwap or Curve or Balancer, what's important here, I'm just checking to make sure my screen's working okay. What's important here is that we're using something that allows us to trade cryptocurrencies, but it's permissionless and it's trustless. So it means I don't have to, I'm really trying to dumb this down. I don't have to ask anyone for permission. I don't have to sign up with an email. All I have to do is just connect my Ethereum wallet. Once I've connected my Ethereum wallet, I can then choose what token I'm starting with, in this case, like ETH, and then what is the token I want to trade to. So let's just pretend it's Aave in this example. And then we have this pool of liquidity in the middle. Sorry, let me go ahead and connect my MetaMask. We have this pool of 50% Aave, 50% Ether. And so this is the way that Uniswap and SushiSwap work. It's a little bit different when you talk about Balancer. Balancer's a little more sophisticated in terms of how those liquidity pools work. Just for the sake of time, we'll focus on the simpler 50-50 example here. But anyways, yeah, this is basically replacing my need to go to a centralized exchange where often we work with a closed order book. And it just means that normally for every buyer, there is a seller, and it is not necessarily just this large pool of 50% Ether, 50% Aave. And for those that provide the liquidity, there's this thing here that says liquidity provider fee. They earn 0.3%. So every trade, you pay 0.3%. And then let's give an example and pretend that, let's say this pool, let's pretend that I own 1% of it. If I owned 1% of it, I would earn 1% of the 0.3% on every trade. And so in this case, if I was to trade 1 Ether, I would pay 0.003 ETH. And all of those that are liquidity providers that are lending their 50% Ether, 50% Aave in this pool, they would be able to then collect on those fees. And so over time, one that is a liquidity provider can earn, based on the total volume that is trading in this pool. So it's, the more trading volume, the better it is for a liquidity provider in terms of earning those fees. But we'll talk a little bit later about how prices going up and down can cause you to be impacted by what's called impermanent loss. All right. So let me pause a second, see if there's any questions. Here we go. We're going to cover this, but someone just asked, I put some liquidity in DPI ETH, and it is down to 2/3 the balance on both tokens instead of one. Yeah, that would be referred to as you went in with a certain balance of those tokens, and that balance has changed, and that is due to the fact that the token prices have diverged. One has gone up maybe more, and the other one has gone down, or one has gone down more, and the other one hasn't gone down as much. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Let's see here. I think we covered everything on that front then in terms of like what is an AMM, but let's talk more about impermanent loss. So here we go. I'm going to hop over. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's cover one more thing. I'm going to show you how to do this in Zapper, but I think it's important to appreciate what many others have used in AMMs and what really would still be there in AMMs if we didn't have Zapper. Actually, I'm going to share a different screen. Here we go. Okay, so we talked about the fact that AMMs are these permissionless, trustless DEXs. They're like a decentralized exchange where I can trade tokens. The reason I'm able to do that is because I'm showing you the other side of the equation. This is where someone is adding liquidity or becoming what we're talking about today, becoming an LP, a liquidity provider. So if I were to come here and let's say I was going to put in some wrapped Bitcoin and some Ether. If I put in, let's say 0.01 wrapped Bitcoin, based on the price of Ether and wrapped Bitcoin, based on the liquidity in this pool, I would need this much. Now, if I translated these both to US dollars, you would see that they're equivalent. It's 50% versus 50% of this. If let's just pretend for a moment, if this was $1,000 worth of wrapped Bitcoin, it would be $1,000 worth of Ether. And so I'm putting in these two shares of my tokens. And then once I deposit those, I then own a share of the pool. So in this case, I'll own a very, very small amount, less than 0.01% of the pool. But if I were to jump into this pool, it means now, let's pretend for a sec that I owned 1% of the pool based on, let's say it was $100 million in the pool and I put in $1 million. I now own 1% of all the liquidity. So every time someone trades, I as a liquidity provider am earning 0.3% of all trades. So I'm earning the proportional amount of that 0.3% on all trades. So that's it. That's really like how simple an AMM is. I think of it as like a community-owned exchange. Part of the reason that they've always fascinated me is that years ago, when centralized exchanges were really the only option, you would watch these very volatile days. Especially during the bear market, prices would fall and there would be lots of selling activity. And when that would happen, really just the centralized exchanges benefited. And I'm not accusing them of this is nothing malicious. This is their business model. And so you would look at those days and realize they were earning humongous profits. Well, with Uniswap, SushiSwap, Balancer, Curve, and other AMMs. It's awesome because now you can own a piece of that by being a liquidity provider. And so even when prices are down, or let's say it's a terrible day of the market selling off, and again, people are upset because prices are going down, you can still benefit by earning these market making fees. All right, so let's talk about impermanent loss, because this is the part of this that isn't ideal when you're a liquidity provider. So here we go. Let me hop to, actually, I'll just quickly share a slide on it, and then we'll talk about it in a simulation. Here we go. All right. Okay, so impermanent loss, and by the way, I chopped up a definition from the Yearn Finance DeFi glossary, so thanks to them. They did a great job. These are mostly broken up sentences from their definition. So with impermanent loss, what we talked about already is that I, as an LP, provide liquidity so that, I provide liquidity so that buyers and sellers can trade. And what happens is, let's pretend that I went into the Ether wrapped Bitcoin pool. The price of Ether and wrapped Bitcoin are whatever they are when I go into the pool. The chance that the prices will be identical when I leave the pool is not likely. So it's very likely that in order to maintain that 50-50 ratio, it's likely that we'll basically see a fluctuation in the amount of wrapped Bitcoin and Ether. So if you consider asset prices are constantly changed by the AMM pool in response to trading, this is in an effort to ensure that LPs can receive the same amount of assets they deposited when they withdraw. But when we have typical sort of movement in the prices of these tokens, what can happen is that you as an LP, when you leave the pool eventually, when you're done being a market maker and earning those fees, the 0.3% in the case of Uniswap, you leave the pool and you no longer have the exact amount of assets upon withdrawal. So that difference is what people refer to as impermanent loss. And I love the definition. I don't know who wrote this at Yearn, but it was the dollar value of the assets they withdraw would typically be lower than if they had not provided liquidity and just held the assets. This dollar value shortfall is known as impermanent loss. The loss is said to be impermanent because if asset prices were to return to the same level or same place during the withdrawal, the loss is eliminated. So if we were to go back to an example here, let me show you an example of an LP that I had open. Okay, so this is at crocco.finance, crco.finance. You can go there, put in defidad.eth, and you can actually play with what's called the simulator here. And if you go to the simulator, you can choose from any one of these LPs that I've ever had open. And then what you're able to do is start to understand what would have happened if I had just not been an LP and simply held my tokens, simply held the DPI, 50% DPI, 50% Ether. And so if you go down here to the bottom left, let's pretend that DPI went up by 5x, which it actually did. I've been tracking it since they launched, and I think it's been up as much as 5x. You can see here that, first off, by me holding 50% DPI, 50% Ether, I'm still up because I'm holding two tokens that have gone up in price over time. And so you can see here, I'd be up $3,787 based on the position I started on December 7th. But there was some impermanent loss to consider here. If I had simply just held the tokens, 50% Ether, 50% DPI, I could be up actually a bit more. And so that's where this impermanent loss comes into play. I'm not talking in this case about the extra fees that I earned as well, but this is an example of, like, it's not like I had a losing situation here. You know, I could have been in this pool because I was worried about maybe I had 100% DPI. So I'm 100% in this position. I'm exposed to all DeFi related tokens, and I'm worried about the market, starting to get bearish, and I want to be in more ether. I could have gotten into this position to do that, to basically like split my exposure and start to hold some more ether. And so that could have been my strategy, but point being, I did experience some impermanent loss because the price of DPI went up so much more than ether during that time. And then what I love down here is you can see it's just showing the number up above the negative $2,340. But my total value in this liquidity provision, in this LP, is 6,851. But if I had simply been holding the DPI and ETH, it would have been 9,192. Another way to think about this is when you are holding an LP, it's like you're holding a trading position of two tokens. It's just that I'm being paid a portion of all of the trading fees for holding that position, 50% Ether, 50% DPI. And as prices go up, I'm always doing the opposite of what the market's doing. So if DPI, in this case, I'm showing it in the bottom left here, if DPI had gone up twice as much, well, what happens? If this goes up twice as much while this remains relative to it at the same price, as DPI is going up, I'm selling. I'm technically buying more Ether then as it's going up. But then let's say DPI is going down in price, I'm actually buying DPI because others are, what are they doing? In the Uniswap AMM, folks are, let's pretend they're selling DPI. Well, I'm a market maker. I'm enabling them to be able to do that. And so I'm taking think of it as this, I'm taking a hit and I'm technically buying DPI as the price is going down. And again, these can be ways to deploy strategies that are opposite of wherever the market's headed. Maybe I want to accumulate DPI the next time it draws down, and that could be a reason that I'm holding this position. All right. So that's my best attempt at explaining impermanent loss. Let's talk about how to become an LP. I think this is the easy part, and this is what we work on at Zapper. So let's go ahead and share my Zapper screen. Here we go. Okay, so if you go to Zapper.fi, if you've never used it, you can connect your wallet. You can visualize your whole DeFi portfolio like I am here. If I click into liquidity pools, here's an example of 4 different pools that I'm in. And you can see, I have as little as $20 to as much as, in this case, $534 in different liquidity pools. So I'm a market maker in Loopring with Ether and Tether. I'm in another pool that is all stable coins, which is the Y curve pool. And anyways, you get the point here. So let's hop over to the pool tab. Now, normally, if I were going to become a liquidity provider before all of this existed, you would have had to prepare 50% Ether and let's say 50% wrapped Bitcoin. And then I had to go to SushiSwap or Uniswap or any other AMM, and I would give permission to spend my wrapped Bitcoin, to spend my Ether. So those are 2 transactions. Then I would actually deposit the 2 of them. So normally that would be 4 transactions. We give you a lot more flexibility here. You can enter using a single token instead. So if I start with Ether, I can enter this wrapped Bitcoin Ether SushiSwap LP. So again, I'm starting with 1 Ether, but I could also start with all sorts of other tokens here. I could start with DAI, and let's say I've got 500 DAI. Our smart contracts here will swap my DAI for 50% wrapped Bitcoin, 50% Ether, and then deposit that. And so the only difference here, subtle difference in what I just showed with Ether, is with any ERC20 token, if you're new to this, any token other than Ether is going to require you to give an approval to spend that token. With Ether, you don't have to, because it's the native token of Ethereum and you can just send it. So if I go back to Ether and I put this in, there we go. I'm all set to go. Now I can hit confirm. And that would be it. I'm going to skip the MetaMask transaction here, but that would be the next step. So let me just reject that in the background. Now, on the flip side of that, if I'm already in a liquidity pool, I can withdraw from it. So I could go, let's say, to here, to this LTI DAI liquidity pool, and I could withdraw. And I can withdraw either into 2 tokens, LTI and DAI. So I could leave this pool and end up with about 9.7 LTI and 10.3 DAI. Or I could withdraw it all into something like Ether, or I could withdraw it into something like DAI. So it just gives you a lot of flexibility. Instead of me having to enter with 2 different tokens in a specific ratio, I can enter with any token with any amount. So anyways, that's how we enter into a liquidity pool. And gosh, I'm trying to think if there's anything else there to track. We're not going to talk about yield farming today, but just know this. All you would normally do is you would enter into that LP, and then you normally can stake it at Zapper.fi/farm. And that's how different protocols reward you with tokens. Next thing I just want to quickly mention is, like asset LPs are ideal because it has minimal impermanent loss. So when you enter a pool, like I was showing earlier, there was a Curve Y pool, and it's made up of all stable coins. Well, if all of these coins are pegged to the dollar, or let's say they're all tokenized Bitcoin, or they're synthetic Ether and Ether, when you talk about a pool with everything that's essentially the same value, well, now you can just focus on earning those rewards, earning the market making fees, and I don't have to worry about the impermanent loss. So that's all I want to say about that. Last thing I want to cover is risks to being a liquidity provider. Here we go. Okay, so just the usual sorts of risks that I consider with any sort of DeFi application. Smart contract bugs, if you're using SushiSwap, Uniswap, Curve, Balancer, whatever, everything has the risk of a smart contract bug. But we can mitigate that by doing research on whether the team has had their smart contracts audited. It doesn't guarantee then that I will not be at risk of losing my funds, but it is definitely a good thing, I think, when smart contracts have been audited. We can also mitigate that risk with DeFi insurance like Nexus, Armor, and Unslashed. So those are other options. I can basically buy like a car-like insurance for my assets that are deposited into different DeFi apps like liquidity provision. We talked about impermanent loss, admin keys. It's something always to be aware of. I'm not worried about that with like a SushiSwap or Uniswap or Balancer or Curve, just because they've taken precautions to abstract away those controls. But I'm calling this out in case of new AMMs. Always be on your toes. You never know. There could be some bad actor out there trying to trick you into putting your money into a new AMM where they still hold the admin key. Last thing is, if I go into a like asset pool, especially those with tokenized Bitcoin or something like stable coins, just be aware that, those pegs can fail, or those pegs can at least depeg. And if they depeg, it can start to cause me problems in terms of the ratio of those different assets in the pool. So just another thing to be aware of there. That's all we're going to cover for today, though. Just wanted to do a short lesson on that. I know it's a really important mechanism to understand in DeFi. I hope this is helpful. I want to remind everyone you can subscribe at tv.zapper.fi. If you want to try that yourself, go to Zapper.fi and you can get into any one of those LPs. There's about 1,000 plus liquidity pools and vaults that are available. And then there's about 500 farms that are related to a lot of the liquidity pools at Zapper.fi/farm. So other than that, thanks for tuning in, and I'm gonna double check. There were a few questions. I think I covered them all. One thing Jim asked, do I buy insurance? I do. I do it when I know I'm going to be in a pool for more than 30 days. So that's the one thing is I'm always thinking like, will I be in this long enough to warrant buying some DeFi insurance? So other than that, thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. We'll be back on Wednesday with a new episode of Yield TV. And I think that's it. Yeah. All right. Yeah, everyone stay safe. Bye.